Did anybody finish the book?
Not finished.
Who's finished the book? Hands up. Right on. Pretty poignant ending, huh?
Yeah.
Stuff punching you in the face and laughing about
I
it.
think that's the one that's like 50 pages.
Yeah. There's some really long chapters, some super short chapters.
Did you guys make it to chapter 15?
You guys did? All right. Well, I'll apologize first for not wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Numerous people have pointed that out to me today. Yeah. But I'm just glad because I had dental work done. I'm glad that my jaw now is not numb anymore. I was worried that I was going to be up here like, wow.
That would be an interesting idea.
So the first thing I wanted to do was, as I've committed before, it's my commitment to you guys, is to give you a preview of what the essay questions might look like. And I say might because I'm not going to change them a lot, but this doesn't mean they're going to be exactly this word for word on the deal, right? So think of it as like 80 to 85% there. I already have 4. Usually I give you 3 and I say I don't know the 4th one yet. I have 4 because of the kind of conversation I want to have today. So just, again, if that sounds new, it is. As an artistic movement, realism motivated much socio-political change in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck used realism to promote the idea of organized labor as benefiting families against faceless companies. Did you find his methods persuasive? Include 4 to 5 examples of passages that contribute to your opinion of his views. So as usual, you don't have to agree with the author. In fact, you might vigorously disagree. So that's going to be literary critique on his views about organized labor. Essay idea, I'll call it number 2. One key literary device in Grapes of Wrath are the vignette chapters before each story chapter. Steinbeck used these to set a background in the reader's mind to flashback or foreshadow what would be happening next with the Joad family. Did this contribute positively to your experience reading the novel? Include 4 to 5 examples from different vignette chapters in discussing your experience. Okay? Pretty straightforward stuff, right? Nothing super surprising here or anything else. Number 3. One of the themes in the Grapes of Wrath is that human life should be highly valued. Many times in the novel, we see humans treating other people like animals, or even worse than animals. Was there any imagery that presents this in a shocking way, which engaged emotions like anger, sympathy, or joy as you were reading? Include 4 to 5 examples of this and how they made you feel. So again, I want a literary analysis or a critique from your perspective as the reader. 4th one, and this one again will sound new until we chat about it today. Not totally new. Steinbeck was profoundly influenced by his Christian faith in writing The Grapes of Wrath, and we find dozens of allusions to biblical stories, themes, and even quotations. In your opinion, why did Steinbeck base so much of this symbolism in Scripture? Include 4 to 5 examples of these allusions as you discuss the author's purpose. And as a reminder, allusion is spelled this way, right? There are 2 words that we kind of pronounce almost the same. This is that literary device when you are alluding to something, you're referencing something. Generally things like Greek mythology or the Bible or Shakespeare or other things, right? Stuff that we allude to. So those are the 4, as I'll call them, working essay ideas. Shouldn't be anything too surprising based on our conversation so far. Yes, ma'am? I could, but I'm not going to do that. I do want to preserve a little bit of kind of be ready for the test. Yeah. I'll send them on the day of, like at that time, but not. There's a little bit of kind of, be prepared for a test. However, that is a good segue, and I'm not even joking, into the end of unit presentations. So recall at the end of each unit, novels, poetry, plays, and short stories, you would be selecting one of the works from that unit and making a presentation to the class about it. We already talked about this a little bit before. There's the Google Doc is on Slack. It's in the syllabus. So that would be one way you could prepare for the presentation, addressing your question, Gracie. Is like, I want to talk about something that wasn't on the essay, or it was, or I wrote an essay on this and I got a good score on it and I really want to dive deeper, whatever. Might be actually something you could spend a little bit of time on during Thanksgiving holiday. There's no homework for the class per se. We'll start reading Animal Farm, but that might be a good time to kind of build your novels presentation. A couple of weeks ago, there was a question about using PowerPoint or Google Slides. I'm okay with that, but remember that there is the one rule, I guess, that I put in place, which was no visual aids, right? Whether it's Google Slides or a poster board or anything, should be just text, right? So it doesn't count to have a visual aid that's just like a profound quote or the title of the book, whether it's a poster board or a PowerPoint. So if you're going to do PowerPoints, make them something that's not just text.
I'm gonna use Google Slideshow.
What's that?
I'm gonna use Google Slideshow.
Or Google Slides, yeah, whatever.
So,
I've been Microsoft Excel since '96,
Don't
baby,
have
so I've got
any-
habits.
so don't have any visuals?
No, you must have at least one visual aid,
Okay.
but no visual aids should be just text, right?
Oh.
So if you come up with a poster board and you're like, here's my favorite quote, I'm like, that's wonderful, that doesn't count as at least one visual aid.
Okay. Can it be anything? Or does it have to be like a poster board or?
It can be anything.
Okay.
I think I had some ideas in here.
And then it's also a speech.
It's a presentation. Now, whether you want to approach that as like an expository speech, or whether you want to do it as even like a dramatic reading of a very poignant scene,
Okay.
like go nuts, right? I was in speech and debate and theater in high school, so I'm adjacent to that theater nerd stuff if you want to do that.
Also, how long does that have to be?
5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be memorized. This is not a high pressure executive deck, right? It's just pick one of the readings or works that you really liked or didn't like that you really want to talk about, and talk about it. I'm going to invite parents, so when we get that schedule for that week of who's going which days, if they want to come, they can. But ideas for VAs, visual aids, which is what you asked about. It can be as creative or formal as you like. You could have a prop that was important to a scene, or a costume showing how a character looked, or illustrations to show how the action moved between scenes, or a chart comparing and contrasting parts, things like that. So be as creative or as like formal businessy, I guess, as you want. It's kind of like the essays. I'm not grading you on the style and the format of the presentation. It's more just engaging with the reading has been my goal. Cool? Or if not cool, understood. I think it's pretty light. All right, well, for anyone who's gone further in the reading, perhaps to the end, is there anything that you're already furious about or super excited about and you just want to chat about and start the class off at all? Because there's some pretty infuriating stuff near the end. Would you agree? Yes, no, maybe not? Yeah. It was poignant. It was emotionally charged.
There's a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff that has to do with like law enforcement, but I'm like, this will not fly.
Yeah.
Like, even the thing with Tom getting arrested for killing the guy kind of made no sense to me, because he stabbed him. He was trying to kill him, it was just self-defense.
I mean,
Right.
nowadays, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
self-defense. You
And
would
then-
go to an office of some kind
You
to
go to
like see
court.
what happened. Yeah,
He
court.
was in court, but he wouldn't have been charged.
He might have been charged, arraigned, but allowed to go on bond, things like that. You're absolutely right. So when we think about the socio-political changes that happened as a result of these kinds of literature, some of them are things like that, right? Also, most of the law enforcement in here, I was thinking about that this morning, was portrayed as kind of like local deputies and stuff who were corrupted, whereas the government place, right, sanitary unit number 4, which is chapter 22, also government, but like not corrupt. It was enlightened and helpful, you know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. There was a way that like local law enforcement was portrayed versus I'll call it kind of federal or maybe state government, which was bigger. Where as long as you had your your licenses or you paid your fees or whatever, you were fine. It's a really good topic. Not one we focus on a lot, but absolutely I agree.
And then like the cop who came, or like the deputy who came to the Hooverville, is that what it's called? In chapter 20, he was like, well, first of all, there was a lot of things wrong with him, but also he shot a civilian
Yes,
and was like faced no consequences for it.
absolutely. Blew her hand off.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
And
She
then
no
all
longer
they did
has
was
enough
say,
face.
get her a doctor.
Yeah, and then they were like, yeah, call her an ambulance. We're out.
They were like,
Yeah.
it should be fine. And then like there was a lot of issues that I was like, why would you do that? Plus, like even if he hadn't shot her, he discharged his weapon like
Yeah.
like unjustly because no one was armed, no one was threatening blood.
Right.
And he was doing that but that was after.
Right.
Because he deserved it.
Yeah, he did not check down range, right? It's a huge part of how law enforcement operates today, is they don't just fire blindly into a crowd because there's somebody there, right? They take a very big risk if there are civilians in the way.
Nowadays, they don't even chase you if you're driving
You're
on
not
a road.
allowed to.
Yeah, some states, right? Some states. So that's
We're going to
20, call it 2020s, because that's actually fairly new. That's not even like 2010s. That's like 2020s. Law enforcement officers, right? No chases in a lot of states or municipalities, no car chases, because the idea of a high-speed car chase with 10 or 20 cars is dangerous. Whether it's right or wrong,
They don't even
that's the
have that
decision
many
that has
police
been made.
officers to drive those cars anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of big differences. Can you imagine being shot at just because you're down on your luck in Hooverville and a particularly corrupt deputy doesn't like you? Which is kind of how it went. I mean, afterwards he got kicked in the neck, and so then, yeah, sure. Yeah,
But not
karma.
justice.
But not justice, right? Which is a great thought. I ironically and accidentally picked blue for that. Back to blue. Anyway, all right. Any other thoughts on that? The portrayal of law enforcement, or even the portrayal of federal and state government versus, or which included, I'm going to put here, and self-government, which is what they had in Sanitary Unit 4, right? As long as they kept things under control, they were allowed to self-govern. So who remembers from chapter 24? Who's gotten that far? Have you? Yeah, you did, Cameron did. They're having a dance at the Sanitary Unit 4. It's kind of a time for just to enjoy life a little bit. And some provocateurs are sent in to try to start a riot. And there are already deputies outside waiting for the agreed upon time to roll up. So there's a lot, and because they didn't like the self-government. So there are a lot of thoughts and ideas there that Steinbeck is portraying for sure. What was going on in the 1930s? Again, when the book was written, 39, but little something called Prohibition had just ended. You want to know what that is? All alcohol was illegal in the United States. It was a constitutional amendment for those of you in the Constitution class, and then it was repealed. And what was happening during the Prohibition era? Organized crime. Al Capone and all those guys. So a lot of that background informs, law enforcement and how they were treating folks and everything at the time in the book. For Steinbeck's contemporary readers, meaning the readers of the day, they would have had these thoughts in mind. For a lot of years that my favorite movie was, I can't remember the name now, Untouchables. So if you want to watch that sometime. Kevin Costner, not Al Capone, Robert De Niro. It's about Al Capone and all that. Anyway. Good. Any more thoughts on the portrayal of law enforcement or I'd even say like municipal law enforcement versus federal and state? you think about in other countries, LEOs generally can't even carry firearms like in the UK, right? So their method of policing is different until they call their version of the SWAT team. Those guys do carry. But yeah, a lot of different ideas on law
What
enforcement
did
policy
they
and
do? They
everything
just
else.
run around with batons or something?
Yeah,
Probably
batons.
tasers.
Yeah, they wear light armor and
Are
stuff as well.
tasers allowed in the UK? By the police?
Honestly, top of my head, I don't know.
Because I would feel like they'd be really boo about that because it looks like a gun.
They allow knives.
Well, they allow knives, and they have very restrictive gun laws. So the only way to get a gun there is it's generally like for hunting, and so it's going to be a long gun, right? Rifle or shotgun, things like that. So it's a whole different context. But it comes from a different philosophy about policing as well. That's the only point I was making. All right. Well, the fourth essay question that I mentioned is something we haven't talked too much about yet. We did a little bit at the beginning, which was Steinbeck's religion, right? And we're talking about his religion because it informs how he writes the book. Does anyone remember what denomination he is? Episcopalian? And we're not studying the denominations, that's just so that we know, right? It's kind of like Anglicans, it's a little bit between Protestant and Catholic. And unlike Hemingway, I know I mentioned this the other day, I think it was last Tuesday, actually. It was the day we had guests in the class. Hemingway, we talked about, he was struggling with his Catholicism when he was writing. So he was writing imagery as he was struggling with what does it mean to be faith and to have sacrifice and things like that. Steinbeck absolutely was not. Steinbeck was committed to his faith and committed to his Christian values. So I wanted to talk about some of the biblical allusions. And again, that's allusions, not illusions, in the Grapes of Wrath. And let's start with the title, Grapes of Wrath. Does anyone know where that comes from?
I'm assuming the Bible.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. Gold star.
Yay.
Comes from Revelation. Okay, it's about the apocalypse, the day of the Lord, all those various things. The idea is that that's the day when God will judge all unrighteousness. And
the rapture.
long after that. Long after that. No matter your eschatology.
Oh.
Yeah, this
Right.
is in Revelation 14, to have the specific reference. But every eschatology acknowledges this, no matter how you interpret the future and all that kind of stuff. What's interesting to me is that he didn't actually use the phrase grapes of wrath in the book until right at the very end, and I'm trying to see where I wrote that down. It's the final sentence in chapter 25. Chapter 25 is a world-building chapter where he's talking about farmers who are dumping produce and burning farms because they don't want to pay to have it picked, and that will help keep prices up. Different kind of economic conversation there. The final sentence in chapter 25, Steinbeck writes, and it's the people who are watching it who both can't afford food and are hungry, and all this food is being dumped or burned in front of them, and aren't being given a job to buy food. And he writes, in the souls of the people, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage. Of course, the vintage being when the grapes are collected and stomped for wine, and all the imagery that goes along with that. Any thoughts on that? Commentary? I also picked out some general themes of the Bible, or general motifs that are in the work. Things like caring for one's fellow man, the dignity of having work, of doing work, taking care of family, caring for the poor and oppressed, right? These are all ideas that are throughout the scriptures. Oh, getting back to the grapes of wrath bit. I thought it was interesting because he wrote this as interpreting the people who were watching all the food get dumped and burned, and they weren't allowed to eat it or harvest it. And that also recalled to my mind ideas from the scriptures, primarily from the Old Testament under the Mosaic Law, where the poor were allowed to glean from your field, right? If you were a farmer or a landowner in ancient Israel, you were not supposed to cut all the way to the edge. You were supposed to leave gleanings for the poor and the oppressed. And there were a lot of passages I found in the books of prophecy and wisdom literature in the Bible where God was declaring punishment for those who were oppressing the poor, stealing land, using unfair scales and weights, charging financial interest, right? A lot of these things that Steinbeck is in effect accusing the kind of corporate farmers of doing. So it ties into the whole, nearly the last sentence of the world building and then the title of the novel. Kind of a big thematic story of the whole thing.
Other one would be Respecting the Dead.
Yeah.
In this book, funny to die, and there
Yeah.
was still time. They were very, very when they died.
100%. I completely agree, and I made particular notes on Grandpa's death, because that was the only time a Bible appears in this novel. The Wilsons had one. He took a blank page out of the back and he wrote a scripture on it, like to leave with him when he was buried. It also said, by the way, nobody killed him, right? He died of natural causes. And he wrote from the Psalms, "Blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered." So, absolutely, the respect for the dead, and compare that to almost the last scene. Not quite the last scene, but
I
almost.
found that part of the book hilarious because it reminded me of Joker from Batman. By the way, I didn't kill him.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Oh,
like,
yeah, I did laugh at that. I was
Yeah.
like, if I dug this body up and I read this note, I would 100% think it was murder.
Yeah, absolutely. Whoever wrote this note is the murderer. We don't even need to investigate.
No, and we
by the way,
definitely,
I did
we
not kill
definitely
him.
didn't kill him. He was not murdered.
That's 100%.
No,
So if we think about the journey in the novel, the whole journey from Oklahoma to California, this is not a Sunday school, but some of these topics will get a little bit close to that. The journey from Oklahoma to California was kind of like the journey of Exodus, right?
What happened?
The young nation Israel escaping
Oh.
Egypt and coming to the promised land.
That's right.
So I've got this entire chunk here on comparing why they're similar. A lot of similarities. This is a big theme that if you go online and you're like, how is Grapes of Wrath referred to the Bible? This one is like number one on everyone's list. So in the Exodus, the nation was leaving slavery in Egypt, going to a promised land of plenty, right? Milk and honey. Well, right?
Oh, they say that several times. They call it a land of milk and honey.
Exactly right. And in fact, in chapter 20 in Hooverville, this is a great call out, Sylvia, thank you. In chapter 20, when they're finally there, they're in Hooverville, Tom Joad says to someone, look, this ain't a land of milk and honey like the preachers say. So he absolutely had that in mind as a comparison. Tom Joad did the character, who of course his mind is being built by Steinbeck, the author. Absolutely. Tom was kind of a Moses. Anyone have any thoughts on how Tom was like a Moses? These are just allusions. This is not a Bible quiz class, so don't worry about it.
He's kind of leading the family in a way, just because
Yeah.
Pa and Grandpa are kind of wimpy.
Yeah.
Well, Grandpa's
Grandpa
dead.
wasn't, but yeah, Grandpa's dead.
He's not exactly
And then
leading.
Pa was kind of just like, he reminds me of my papa. Like super, I don't know, I don't really want to do that. And just very. So he kind of took the leading figure of
Yeah.
the family.
Absolutely. What were you saying,
the grandpa in the story reminds me of my grandpa because he's dead.
Cameron?
So,
I want to see your comedy bit when it hits Netflix.
wait, my grandpa died the same.
Wait, did you bury a note with him that said, I definitely did not do this?
Yeah, no.
Any other thoughts on how Tom is like Moses? I wrote down, well, before the book, he killed a man, went away, and then came back to lead them to the promised land. Right? Moses killed the Egyptian, went to Midian for 40 years, then came back. So there's a parallel there. It's just an illusion. Steinbeck is not teaching us his interpretation of Scripture. He's alluding to it. He's using a familiar story. Yes?
Oh, no, it's not important.
Okay. End of the novel. Pretty poignant for us to have gotten there. Let's talk about it. You guys ready for this? There's a stillborn child. So for everyone who is waiting for Rose and Sharon's pregnancy to be a happy ending, it's not. Okay? And what do? They have Uncle John.
The crazy lady was right.
The crazy lady was right. That it presents some interesting ideas.
Does that mean that the manager was the devil as well?
What do with, for those of us who have read here? They put it in a small wooden box and float it down a river. Does that bring anything to mind with this idea of Exodus and Moses?
So the Egypt Bible story.
That's right.
I forget which one.
This one, right here.
With the Pharaoh's wife.
Pharaoh's daughter.
Oh, daughter?
But you're alright.
Dude, it's been a while since I've watched the Moses movie.
You mean the Prince of Egypt?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I thought you were going to refer to like the Charlton Heston Ten Commandments, which I'll go on the record as saying, not my favorite.
It's so long.
That's what I was going to say. I was kind of confused because in the movie, he didn't go to prison for 4 years, if I remember correctly.
Oh, he didn't go to prison. No, he ran away and went to Midian.
Oh, that's right.
That's where Moses met his wife. He got his father-in-law. Yeah. Tom went to prison. So the parallel is that Tom went away.
Okay.
But he also wasn't away 40 years. So it's just
It was still visible by 4 though.
It is. It's recalling to mind the Bible story. It's not trying to reshape it or reinterpret it. It's just recalling it to mind. It's alluding it.
Also to add to the idea that Tom was kind of the leader of the family.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the younger kids too respect Tom even more than their dad because he killed somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was kind of a lot of emphasis on that. Everyone was like, oh, my brother killed a man.
And then his brother was like, yeah, my brother killed a guy.
Yeah,
He
they're
was very proud
respecting
of that.
strength. Moses was not the older brother, right? Aaron was his older brother. Tom wasn't the oldest Job. There are a lot of little bits. But anyway. So again, this has this broad allusion. And I keep emphasizing that so that nobody takes offense or thinks about, religious problematic ideas or anything like that. Steinbeck is not saying this is a new revelation from God, don't pay attention to the Bible. He's just using references to these ideas in his story. And there's a big difference between those two, yes.
When I first started reading the book and with the title, not about the Moses thing, but I was kind of I didn't realize, I don't remember the Revelation thing, so I was kind of thinking it meant more along the lines of, like, you reap what you sow. Like, they're filling people, they're, like, making suffering, so eventually people are gonna come back and be full of wrath and, like, rebel against them.
I thought it was going to be two families on a grape farm that were trying to kill each other.
We have very different lives.
Well, the idea that there will be this kind of uprising of anger, it is that simmering theme. And even that last sentence that I read in chapter 25, it talks about it. It has that idea there. And we do have little bits of violence and anger that show up, right? Like when, there's a net kicking. There's other people die. We haven't spoiled all the spoilers here yet. And there's the idea, especially in a lot of the world building chapters of the vignettes, that the corporate farmers, and I keep air quoting this because it's a little bit preachy, but the corporate farmers have to keep the people fighting amongst themselves so that they don't join up and in their anger overthrow the corporate
Yeah,
farmers.
they said something, I think in maybe chapter 19, about, like, how,
It's exactly the right chapter.
yeah, what was he talking about? They were talking about how they are, like, turning people against each other. I'm trying to find it because it's conflicting. But like they're talking about how every day like they push it back with the W going into camp, they push back the inevitable rise up while also like making it more and more unavoidable.
Right.
Like with every day.
Right. And that was the point of the theme of organized labor, is that it doesn't require violence necessarily to kind of rise up against these problems. It just requires organization. Now, maybe that leads to violence. Maybe that leads to social change and new laws about things like labor unions, which we have now. Labor unions can be divisive, even today, but we have them for, well, we all know here for teachers, right? So recently there was a strike in Evergreen and all that. We have them for a lot of other workers, like say UPS drivers, but then we also have them for like law enforcement. So unions do provide that kind of organized collective service for different kinds of laborers all over the place. Anything else on this idea of this journey becoming kind of like Exodus in the Bible? Well, I've got another one here. I'll just write it down here, I guess. How about Noah? Dude's name, Noah Jode. Anyone heard of him? So there's a scene in chapter 10, which is when they're first all getting on the car truck, the Hudson, to leave the Jode farm, and they're all on the truck, and Noah is standing there watching, so he's kind of the last one on, and that's when they say, oh, let's bring a dog. So he kind of picks the animal to bring with him. A little bit of a Noah picture. And then in chapter 18, what does Noah do in chapter 18? He leaves.
Walks down a river.
Yeah.
Wants to live on the river.
He walks down the river, and he says to Tom, I can't leave the water. Noah, water. You see what I'm saying? It's an illusion. It's a recall to our mind of those biblical stories. And by the way, story doesn't mean they're fiction. It's just narrative. Yeah. We talked about Rose of Sharon before. Right? Way back on the first Tuesday, we talked about Rose of Sharon, or Rose of Sharon, is in Song of Solomon 2. I think 2:1, I believe. Yeah. Anyone know that book of the Bible? It's between the beloved and the lover. The highly romantic poetry. So anyway, the beloved, the female in that poetic story, calls herself a Rose of Sharon. So it expresses beauty, innocence, a young wife, and soon for motherhood. Well, what a crazy coincidence. That's exactly who this was in this novel.
Husband leave her too.
What's that?
Did the husband leave her in the Bible story?
No.
Oh.
No. He was gone often. Because it is a poetry about him waiting for my lover to return, and he's like, I can't wait to get back to my beloved.
So maybe that's the author saying, hey, by the way, Connie was trying to get back to her.
Possibly. We never know what happens to Connie. Right? Spoiler. I think we already revealed that.
Because he seemed
Connie
like a
leaves.
pretty chill dude. He seemed like a really good father at first because he was super caring, and then it just kind of seemed really odd for him to just disappear all of a sudden.
No, I
Because
really
it
like
didn't
that.
feel like something he would do just because of what he's done so far. Like he went out of his way to do all these things for her.
Although it did say in the beginnings, like when they first, Rose of Sharon first came in,
Yeah.
like on the truck bed, he said something about how, like, now that she was pregnant, she was kind of a different person, and it wasn't the woman that he married. So maybe kind of like foreshadowing that he
Yeah.
doesn't really love who she is anymore.
He also was asking her if they would leave together and from the family, and she was like, no.
No. She was telling
Right,
me that.
but he meant earlier before they went on the trip.
Yeah. And he was going to study and start working in radio or start doing it, like he had different ideas.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned about leaving the family, because in the first act, right, we talked about how the vignette chapters, they had kind of a wrap-up chapter with not followed by Jodes, and then we entered Act 2, or Part 2. In the first act, most of the family was about sticking together no matter the cost. In the second act, we see a lot of, I need to go now. Very interesting change. Not something we talked a lot about, but maybe a presentation idea for someone who really likes this book. This is not a bad book. It's long. It's not bad. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I've got more, but I don't want to just keep taking up listening to my own voice.
About the presentation, I just have one last question.
Yeah,
Are
sure.
we allowed to do it on 2 separate books, or just one book is what we're supposed to focus on?
I mean, yeah, focus on one, but if there's something maybe that compared between two, you thought either like you're comparing two books, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was gonna try and compare Frankenstein and the Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, if you want to do that. We actually we talked about the realism versus romanticism and stuff. That would be fun.
Yeah, that's all I was
Yeah, that's fine.
gonna do. Okay.
And if you have questions like that, feel free to hit me on Slack, ask me after here, whatever, it's fine, right?
Talking about
Yeah.
where Jake used the one book and we used to talking about it.
Any of those. Yeah, I really left it wide open. It's just make a presentation to the class about it. And then it was all the rules, and the rules are mostly you don't have to worry about. Don't have to be memorized. Begin with some basic information, but then talk about literary. It does have to be about literary aspects of the work.
Okay.
So, I wouldn't just be like, the movie was great, let me tell you about the movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we are doing literature in the class, but it doesn't have to be about literary stuff that we've discussed. Maybe there was something that you really wanted to think more about. It wasn't on an essay, and then we've moved on, and you're like, I want to get back to that. Great. Awesome. Any other biblical allusions?
Now we're doing it.
Yeah. I hate that road is only 25 miles an hour. Like, there's nobody on it. Let me go faster. Sorry.
Probably because the road's so narrow. And on that road.
And plus, we're in a residential
Amber's
district.
Cool. But it's not
We're not
considered.
cool.
So let's talk about my man, the former Reverend Jim Casey. Let me ask this. When we're done today, and you know that you're just preparing for essays, is anyone going to read the rest of the book? Like, really want to? Okay.
I'm gonna finish it.
Yeah.
But
It's really good. So there are some spoilers, and we're about to get into a couple of them. Jim Casey, what's that?
Yeah, rich.
He got arrested early on. That's not too much of a spoiler. We're way past that part of the book. And why did he get arrested though?
Because, he kicked the guy in the neck, but he also took
He
the
didn't.
blame.
Tom kicked the guy in the neck.
no, it was Jim
No,
Casey.
he tricked the guy.
Or Tom
And
tripped the
then-
guy. Yeah,
And
you're
then
right.
he was about to, I think, attack Tom,
You're right.
so Jim kicked him in the neck.
But the
But
guy
he
was
took-
pointing out who he knew.
He took the blame for Tom.
Right. So Jim
He sacrificed
takes
himself.
takes the blame for others sin. That's right.
Wow. No, so he,
Jim Casey is Jesus.
And
same initial.
Oh wait.
That is
Same
huge.
initials.
that is
It's-
huge.
I was totally
Jim
kidding.
Casey has the same initials
And
as
he-
Jesus
Wait,
Christ.
and it
Even
also
though he's not very
also
good.
foreshadowed
He's not-
because
he's
Jim
not-
Casey was
he's not a
comparing
very good
himself
person,
to Jesus.
but-
He was. He was saying,
Like, he doesn't understand.
yeah,
Not very great.
It's not actually
The more
accurate.
Right.
stuff.
it's an illusion. It's an illusion. It's absolutely not biblical truth. We're not supposed to learn spiritual things from this.
Yes.
I think
for
he
sure.
also kicked the guy in the neck because he didn't want to get shot because he was kind
Right.
of just.
Oh,
Yeah.
That was definitely
Well,
a-
and to your point, early on, he has this quote where he says, I ain't saying I'm like Jesus. Right?
Right. But
So-
he was constantly comparing himself to what Jesus did.
Right. But he says, I did get mixed up like him, and I went out into the wilderness like him without any camp and stuff. But you're right. Then not at the end, but, and I'm sorry, I gotta get here. So spoiler for some of y'all. What happens to Jim Casey in chapter 26?
dies.
Yeah, he gets his head smashed.
Oh, dang.
One club.
Oh.
Dang.
Flashback to the adult.
Wait, like a public execution?
Well, it's in front of a group. It's
Is it like a fight? He gets in a fight?
he's mouthing off to someone who isn't interested. But what does he say to the person before he gets whacked in his head? He says, you don't know what you're doing.
Jesus said that.
That's exactly right. Right? as Jesus was on the cross, he said, "Forgive them, Father, they don't know what they do." Again, this is not replacing good theology. This is just an allusion to that. But Jim twice tells the guy, and these are rabble rousers. These aren't deputies or anyone else, right? They're paid rabble rousers who are protecting the farms. Don't do this. You don't know what you're doing, and they kill him anyway. Again, an allusion to the story of the crucifixion. Now, we're basically out of time, or almost out of time, but I've got more. And because we know this is probably going to be an essay question, like, let's pump through these.
This would be a really good presentation.
This would be a very good presentation.
You technically already took the presentation.
Tell me about snakes in the story. Yeah,
You run them over.
yeah, they're all over the place. They get run over. They're compared to people we don't like. So in some of the vignette chapters, world building, but I'll use the literary term now. They're calling the Okies, they're like snakes, right? They're people we don't like. They're dehumanizing. But they're also using this particular animal, which is heavy in biblical imagery. Right, with the serpent. That's exactly right. Jim, I think, is talking early on, or no, I'm sorry, Tom is talking early on, maybe, or maybe Muley, one of them, about how Grandpa kind of cleared their land originally to kind of own this farm. And he says he cleared it of snakes. There's a lot of references, so snakes, again, not just in the animal terms, if you're doing, say, the humans and dehumanizing humans, but if you're doing biblical allusions. All of them except for the last bit that I have, which was the last thing that Tom said to his mom, which is also one of the big famous lines in the novel. Right? Does anyone remember that? I mean, not that you have it memorized. This would be chapter 28, when Tom is now separated from the family. As I told you, they start separating in Act 2, by necessity or by want. Like Noah just bounced. Where did I write Noah? I didn't write Noah.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. He's off to the side here. So Tom, by this time now, was wanted because the guy who killed Jim, Tom killed with the handle of a pick, just like Jim. So now Tom's hiding, and his mom visits him one last time before telling him he has to run off forever. And he says, he's kind of like, he says, "Don't worry about me, Mom," is the idea. I'll be around in the dark. I'll be everywhere, wherever you look. Wherever there's a fight so that hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. If Casey knowed, why, I'll be in the way guys yell when they're mad, and I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when our folks eat the stuff they raise and live the houses they build, I'll be there. God, I'm talking like Casey.
Sounds like Santa Claus.
Yeah, a little bit. But there's the idea of, where does the idea of Santa Claus come from? The idea that someone's always watching. So it's Tom now is kind of a righteous watcher.
How did we get from
Guardian
Moses
angel.
to Santa Claus?
So he's basically
Because they're both based in the Bible,
so he's
ultimately.
basically saying to his mom, "I'm going to be a guardian angel."
Yeah, very much. So I said watcher, which is the term in Genesis 6, or I'm sorry, in Book of Daniel, but you're right, guardian angel. Good call. Thank you. It doesn't. It's its own line. It's Tom.
It was probably what I was comparing people.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you Thursday. Ready for this essay? Bring your notes. Bring your book. Prep for stuff. Have it ready. So you're like, boom, 20 minutes and I'm out. And then after that, have a fantastic Thanksgiving.
Can I pre-write it?
I mean, bring blank paper, but have your thoughts down.
Thank you.
Thank you.